Hello and welcome, my third entry trilogy Leafs. Today we look at the Lost Legend of Zelda trilogy we never got by, I forgot the name, sorry, the Mantalk. By the Mantalk, yeah, give him a like and subscribe definitely. And yeah, let's see what this is about. Looking forward to it.
Super Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, the trifecta of peak Nintendo 64 era gaming. With the Zelda franchise success,
I would say maybe put Banjo-Kazooie on there. Do not have two Zeldas, and Ocarina of Time is the first one, so it's more deserving just because of that. Well, I'm not gonna say it's better or worse. I like Ocarina of Time more, but you know, without Ocarina of Time, we wouldn't have Majora's Mask. So yeah, Banjo-Kazooie deserves it, but maybe Diddy Kong Racing to just have a third genre. That would be great. I'm way too overthinking this.
successfully shifting over to the 3D plane, I wouldn't be surprised if gamers at the time thought 2D Zelda games like these were completely dead. Until a very magical thing happened.
Yeah, quite honestly, in that day and age, it was like, why would I play 2D games? Like, they are out of date. They're not good anymore. They are shit now. Children are weird, and everything was like the hype. It was all 3D. The world even turned 3D.
Zelda returns to Game Boy Color in an adventure too big for just one game. Rated E for everyone, each game sold separately.
This is the
I think these were the first games I bought two games at the same time. I think I never did that before. And I still remember it. I was like, we were driving somewhere. I don't know, like 12 or something? 13 maybe? 14? I'm not really sure. Yeah, more like 13, 14 probably because I had the money myself. And we stopped somewhere and they had games in that shop and there were these two games and I just thought, well, I have my Game Boy with me. Now I'm gonna have fun.
Legend of Zelda, Oracle of Seasons, and Oracle of Ages. Released for the Game Boy Color in 2001. An experience for the series that's much more than just some follow-up to Link's Awakening. Did you know that this set of games was initially planned as a trilogy?
No.
If you've played these games, Link's quest to save maidens, named after two of the three golden goddesses of Hyrule, Din and
Yeah, and that's why I always thought it's weird that there wasn't a third one. Though, I do know about this third one, I just don't like the name they choose.
Nehru may have left you wondering about the absence of the third maiden, named after Furore, the goddess of courage. Ignoring her minor role in these titles, there was indeed a mysterious unreleased third game featuring Furore planned early in development. With this set of games initially
Yeah, Oracle of Secrets is not the game. It had probably been called Mystical Seed of Power, which is like, first off, you have Oracle of Seasons, Oracle of Ages, and the third one should be Oracle of Secrets, because that's what she calls in the game. But no. And also, Mystical Seed of Power, but Power is Din. Also, the green one should be the lower left. Power is on top.
codenamed the Triforce series. This was an incredibly ambitious project for the Game Boy Color at the time. This is like right before Game Boy Advance. This game was doing next level shit. They linked together, no pun intended. And it wasn't just the Pokemon style of linking where it was two versions of the same game with slight differences. These were two individual games that, when linked together, would unlock new features, and through this linking feature, the player could reveal the true ending to the events of this saga. And I know this sucked back in the day if you had a very strict video game allowance, like me. Imagine seeing the name Ganon spread across the screen at the end of your game facts guide and realizing the only way to fight him is by buying the other game.
Let me guess.
True story. Let's go through these games in order, starting with Oracle of Seasons.
Technically not quite sure. I think there was also a password system in place. So you could have gotten that if you used a fucking game fax. You know, you have access to the internet.
Of course you can play these two in either order, but most tend to put Seasons first, story-wise. It's a peaceful day in Hyrule, with the beginning of the game introducing us to our hero, Link. But something strange is happening. a force summons him deep within Hyrule Castle to the resting place of the Triforce. Oh, and if you're trying to figure out which Link this is in the timeline, don't sweat the details right now, just enjoy the ride. I'll cover it later though. So Link is summoned by the Triforce and is expected to accept a quest on its behalf. And he immediately gets whisked away to an unfamiliar realm without being able to pack a single thing. And before he can even gather his bearings, the sound of jovial music plays in the distance, and after drawing closer to the sounds, Link meets a traveling troupe, with this cutie patootie in the center. Also, Impa is the troupe's cook, but more on that later. The dancer in the center introduces herself as Din, and tells Link that he's arrived in Holodrum before taking his hand and proceeding to dance on him carnival style. But Link's wild ride is interrupted by this guy, Onyx, General of Darkness, who has come to kidnap the Oracle of Seasons. I'm sure you guys can guess who that is. So yeah, after like 3 seconds, Din gets kidnapped, causing the
I always wondered, are they the actual goddesses reborn or just named after them? I don't think the games ever go into that.
Seasons in Holodrum to fall into chaos. More specifically, her being captured causes the Temple of Seasons to fall into the earth, throwing everything out of whack. So after being forcefully dropped into a completely different land, Link already has to save a maiden. But he loved that dance so much, he's not just gonna let Din come to harm at the hands of Onyx. Or is it Onox? Now with that, Oracle of Seasons begins. Now before I continue, if you have even the slightest urge to try out these games, go ahead and snag them on the Nintendo Switch and then come back. Otherwise, let's break down this magic. So shortly after everything goes down, Link finds himself totally confused, miserable, and stuck in the snow. Awakened by Impa, she reveals herself to be the nurse of Princess Zelda, and I find it really odd that she's introducing herself to Link for the first time. She reveals to Link that Din is the Oracle of Seasons, who has control over the balance of the seasons in Holodrum. This in mind, Zelda sensed dark forces closing in on Din and instructed Impa to find her and take her to Hyrule Castle in secret. So instead, she was here posing as the troupe's cook.
I'm just a cook.
But that doesn't matter now, that plan's totally down the toilet. So instead she tells Link to meet the Maku tree in Horon village to find out what to do next. Following her advice, Link awakens the Maku tree and tells him the situation. And I adore the detail on this tree, by the way. Everything from its sleeping animation to how the shadows are depicted on its trunk. This is like peak Game Boy Color graphics right here. It's
absolutely true, and that little leaf on the nose is so cute.
Amazing. So with the Temple of Seasons out of commission, the Maku tree is drained and sends Link on a quest to find the 8 essences of nature to help restore.
I really hope we get Link's Awakening remakes of these games as well. It's just so deserving, and it would be so great to see them in that graphical style.
His power so he can break through the evil that's surrounding Onyx's castle. So Link's mission is now set, and the game opens up for you to explore. And this game sticks to the Zelda formula, with Link braving 8 dungeons to obtain all essences of nature. But of course, there's a lot going on in the land of Holodrum to keep Link busy. Like for instance, this mysterious hooded person wandering around early on in the game. Follow them and Link will find out how deep this rabbit hole goes. There is an entire underground realm in this game known as Subrosia, home of the Subrosians. This is where the Temple of Seasons sunk, and after some exploring, Link will discover the Rod of Seasons inside the temple, giving him the ability to change seasons, starting with the power of winter. So gameplay wise, all the player has to do now is jump on a tree stump and use the Rod of Seasons to change the weather. The overworld is heavily designed around this mechanic, with every piece of this map having...
Honestly, not only a remake, like, just use the seasonal mechanic, which is such a great mechanic because you can change so many things. The traversing, imagine this in a bigger game like Breath of the Wild. That would be wild.
4 different versions of it.
I mean, it gives us so many opportunities. Like, summer could drain water, winter freezes water, obviously. So many good things.
Depending on the season. And it's not just a color filter either. Aspects of the overworld will change with each season, like snow to shovel in the winter, vines to climb in the summer, mushrooms that can be picked in the autumn, and flower buds that bloom in the spring. But these aren't the only changes. The seasons affect things like water levels and ice that Link can walk on during the winter. And this cleverly serves as a gate for progression until Link gets the right season in his arsenal to meet the needs of each situation. The game effectively utilizes the technology in the Game Boy Color, making each season extremely vibrant in its own way. It's mwah. The major hub on this map is Horon Village, where you can interact with several villagers, some of them having unique side quests that Link can tackle during the course of the game. But these kind of side quests and events aren't limited just to this village. There are plenty of events that will occur as Link travels the world. Like Maple, for instance, a snarky witch that flies around the map on her broom. If you bump into her, she and Link will drop a bunch of their items, and then they have to race to see who can steal more from the other. The more you encounter Maple, the more this starts to turn into a rivalry, and the event gets pretty ridiculous after a while, with Maple eventually bringing a vacuum cleaner to suck up items, or a flying saucer to get the edge on Link. The game also has the standard trading quest, where Link trades item after item among the inhabitants of Holodrum, which will upgrade him.
Honestly, trading quests are heavily underused. I always loved these trading quests in RPGs, but they so rarely happen nowadays. I don't think every game should be like retro AF, but give us more of these little things from back then. More mini games, the trading quests, stuff like that. I'm missing those in games today. Still, we get great games, don't get me wrong, but they would just be a bit more spice.
From a book about cuckoos all the way to the Master Sword. One of my favorite side quests stars a couple named Bipin and Blossom, who have recently welcomed a baby into the world. For some reason, during their very first encounter, they let Link choose the name for their son, and as you can see, players can get pretty creative here as long as the name has 6 letters or less. I went with Butts because Assface didn't fit. As you progress through the game, you're meant to keep checking on the child's growth, and Link will be able to make various decisions throughout this quest to determine how Butts here grows up, influencing his personality and whether he grows up to be a hero, a scholar, or someone who mooches off of his parents. And don't worry about how he grows up so fast, the game doesn't explain it, and his parents here pretend like this is absolutely normal. The world of Holodrum also...
Maybe there's just time passing and your adventure in this world takes several years. Like, I always thought, like, even with world maps in games, I always, in my mind, knew that there were more towns and stuff in the game. They just weren't important, so you couldn't get into them. The world map is basically just a representation of the places you have access to that are important in a way, and not like the actual world map of the world of the game. And, you know, with time in a game like this, that could also work. Of course, with 3D games, that's not working as well anymore, because this little sprite can be 12-year-olds and also 30-year-olds. Who could tell? But in 3D, yeah, well, there is a difference there.
Also has a pet system, giving the player the option to enlist the help of Ricky the kangaroo, Dimitri the swimming dodongo, or Moosh, this flying bear thing, to help Link traverse certain areas of the world map. You'll need to find specific flutes to be able to permanently summon a specific animal friend, and in the long run you can only be paired with one. Aside from a couple of sections, I didn't use the animals much, but most players agreed Dimitri is the most useful. I got stuck with Moosh, who honestly felt more like a burden than anything else, but he helped me clear these large gaps and pitfalls, so he has that going for him. But fun side quests aside, once you get to the actual dungeons, I have opinions. Growing up, I played countless hours of both Link's Awakening and Oracle of Seasons. Replaying Seasons as an adult, I have more appreciation for all the new mechanics that the developers packed in this game, and I would say they even seemed inspired by dungeons in Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask. For instance, the final dungeon, the Sword and Shield Maze, takes place in Subrosia, and requires Link to toss giant ice clusters down these fire pits so he can cool down the lower levels and descend to where the boss is. This is great.
That's great design. Yeah, I think that's what he wanted to say there.
Great design, and probably one of the best dungeons in this game. But some of these other dungeons, they feel cumbersome. When looking back at Link's Awakening, the dungeon design feels pretty timeless. They were well paced and cleverly designed, and a lot of other Zelda games have this sense of accomplishment when you unlock those shortcuts leading back to the entrance. This makes backtracking less of a headache and builds on the idea of progression. Link's Awakening accomplished this with tighter and more compact dungeon design, even though most dungeons were understandably smaller than the ones in future handheld Zelda titles. The dungeons in Oracle of Seasons, on the other hand, often feel tedious, and navigating them can be frustrating. I'd sometimes find myself wandering around dungeons for several minutes trying to get myself back on track or return to a room with the next locked door so I could progress. Maps aren't always helpful, and backtracking involves resolving the same puzzles repeatedly, often locked behind minecarts or trampolines or other gimmicks that are unaccounted for on your map. Mini-bosses are usually a midway point in dungeons, and if you defeat them, you get a warp point back to the entrance for easy access to get back deep into the dungeon. And these bosses were a crucial part of what made Link's Awakening's dungeon design feel so tight. and rewarding. But in Oracle of Seasons, these bosses often appear too late to make warp points feel useful. So while Oracle of Seasons was designed to be the more combat-oriented game of the two titles, the real challenge lies in the dungeon navigation and the gauntlet that comes along with that. Despite these issues, I appreciate the challenge and ambition behind larger dungeons, especially within the constraints of the Game Boy Color. I was averaging around 50 minutes to an hour per dungeon, but I'll partly chalk this up to my long 20-year absence from this game. So as Link explores these dungeons leading up to the gripping climax of the game, what was the original plan for these titles? And why are all the bosses here from the original Legend of Zelda? We have to head back to
That is interesting. Huh.
early 1999 and turn our attention to an independent Japanese video game studio known as Flagship. This would be the company that took on the development for both Oracle of Seasons and Ages. Flagship was a third-party team founded by game designer Yoshiki Okamoto, who previously spent many years working at Capcom, heavily contributing to games like Final Fight, Street Fighter II, and the original Resident Evil. After starting up Flagship, he was heavily funded by projects contracted out from Capcom, Sega, and Nintendo. These developers were the muscle behind titles like Resident Evil 2, the Onimusha series, and later on Kirby titles like Kirby and the Amazing Mirror. Okamoto had the idea to remake the original Legend of Zelda and bring it to the Game Boy Color to introduce.
Honestly, Link to the Past style original Zelda would be great. I have a hard time getting into this game. It's hard to say it didn't age well, but like, I don't know. I don't have all that much fun with it. It's kind of tiresome. I'm not gonna say it's bad because it really isn't, but I know I just can't stay on it.
The original game to new children at the time. If the remake was successful, they would go on to make more ambitious Zelda titles along with sequels that they could pump out in 3 to 4 month intervals. They pitched this idea to Shigeru Miyamoto, a man who needs no introduction, and he would join them in planning out this proposal. However, during the scenario writing phase of development, many of the staff members showed interest in dropping the idea of a remake and just jumping into a brand new Zelda title. This sentiment mostly came from the difficulty in remaking the original Zelda game to be friendly to new players, which makes a lot of sense to me because going back to that title is rough. All the changes they were attempting to make to the remake resulted in a world map that was becoming very different from the original Hyrule, and quickly the team realized their mission was harder than they initially thought. So Flagship returned to Miyamoto for help, who suggested a trilogy of new titles instead, each focusing on different gameplay elements. And so the Triforce series was born. Each title in this trilogy was meant to correlate with a piece of the Triforce, the first being Fushigi no Kinomi Chikara no Sho.
This motherfucker don't miss.
Which they roughly translated at the time to The Legend of Zelda, the Acorn of the Mystery Tree, Tale of Power. This was presented to the gaming press at Nintendo Space World 1999, with IGN reporting at that time that this title would have taken place in Hyrule, with Princess Zelda, the Keeper of Seasons, getting kidnapped by Ganon. Ganon would have split the Triforce of Power into 8 pieces, which Link would have had to travel around Hyrule to collect. Ganon would have also used the Rod of Seasons to beam Hyrule Castle to another dimension, which would lead.
Sometimes I would just like them to actually make these games they have technically cancelled in a way, just to see what we didn't got, you know? Like, it would be so interesting. Like, okay, I think the final product sounds much better than what the actual idea was in the first place, but it would be interesting. You could do that like a small series of games made by a smaller team or something, especially if it's simple games like this.
Link to enlist the help of the Ulra tribe in a mystery tree that houses spirits to save Hyrule. So after hearing that, I'm sure the similarities sound quite obvious, with Din taking the place of Zelda, Onyx taking the place of Ganon, and the Ulra tribe most likely being changed to the Subrosians, with their realm being underground rather than in a different dimension. You can also tell the game started as a remake to the original Zelda since the plot is very similar, but look no further than the actual game to prove this with Dungeon 1, the Gnarled Root Dungeon, pretty much being a reimagination.
That is not identical, but almost. But why not? Right? Why not?
Of the very first dungeon in the original game. This explains why the bosses themselves are revamped versions of the original bosses in The Legend of Zelda. In fact, between the original Zelda, Link's Awakening, and A Link to the Past, there are a lot of reused concepts and assets within these titles. Not to mention Facade from Link's Awakening returns as a mini-boss. IGN got to play a 70% complete version of Tale of Power, which included Ricky as their playable animal friend, as well as encounters with Mabel. And the working title for the game would eventually be localized to Mystical Seed of Power, with gameplay focusing on solving
Okay, I guess I had it a bit wrong then?
puzzles by changing the seasons. And the other two games in the trilogy were being developed at the same time, with Nintendo naming them Chie no Sho and Yuki no Sho, which were eventually localized to Mystical Seed of Wisdom and Mystical Seed of Courage.
Okay, then I had false knowledge here. Sorry about that earlier, but okay, that's much better. Very, very much better.
So what happened here? How did the name changes come about, and what happened to this mysterious third game? Well, before we answer these butt-clenching questions, let's wrap up the events of Oracle of Seasons. So while we were busy talking, Link was gathering all the 8 essences of seasons and returned to the fully restored Mako Tree. The Mako Tree gifts Link with the energy of the huge Mako Seed, which penetrates the evil barrier surrounding Onyx's castle. When Link draws closer, the true villains behind this plot reveal themselves. Twin Rova, the 2 old lady Gerudos who raised Ganon, and you may recognize them as bosses from Ocarina of Time. We find out that they're up to no good and were behind Onyx's rise to power, warning Link that there's much more evil to go around, and probably low-key enticing kids to go buy the other game.
Welcome to EV Games.
With the path clear, Link rushes to the castle to save Din. And I want to guess that this is probably going to be a full dungeon in itself, because Onyx has like very puny defenses in his castle. It's 3 rooms of enemies, with Facade making yet another cameo. But clear out these baddies and you end up in the throne room with Onyx, who has a few evil things to say, and then the battle starts. To defeat him, all you have to do is land a few spin attacks while avoiding his mace, and in his desperation, he'll start to use Crystallized Din as a shield, which I actually think was a pretty cool idea. But after a while, Link is
That is definitely a cool idea. That's very creative.
victorious, but just before he can reach Din, he's dropped into the pits below to face Onyx's true form, a giant dragon. And this is when Link discovers he's an evil being summoned
That's basically just Miggy Dramon.
from the Dark Realm by Twin Rova to cause chaos. After another fight, Link manages to vanquish Onyx, who in his final cryptic words reveals to Link that the gears of evil have already begun turning, and Twin Rova's scheme to bring about the Flame of Destruction is progressing as planned. Then he dies. Link saves Din, who thanks him for saving her and hints that there's more going on than meets the eye to convince the player to buy the other game, while Twin Rova further cement the point that their plans are coming to fruition so that the player can go out and buy the other game. And finally, the credits roll, and we see Peace returning to Holodrum, with Link and Din visiting most of the characters we met along the way. There's some really cool illustrations in the credits that add a lot of personality to these characters, and I really wish they were in full color. But the game has finally ended, and we get a password at the very end which will allow us to link our game.
See, you didn't need to link the games directly. Okay, he means linking by just somehow have them interact. The password he included. Yeah. When he said linking, I thought like the link cable, but that's not quite necessary.
Game to Oracle of Ages. But before we travel on to Labrina, I want to point out how awesome it is to be able to load up the save and explore Holodrum while it's at peace. Yeah, you can fire up your save at any time and even talk to Din, who's now chilling in Horon Village. She'll let you know that Impa has moved on to another realm by Zelda's orders to help the next maiden. So this is a better time than any to talk about secrets within the 2 titles and features that require the games to be linked. Secrets are passwords that some NPCs in these games will share with Link that can be used in the other game for a variety of rewards, like heart containers or powerful rings. Oh, and rings. Okay, let's talk about those. Rings are the most useful and at the same time the most useless mechanic within the Oracle games. Link will collect rings throughout his adventure, and when they're equipped, they have different effects, like boosting Link's stats, or making encounters with Maple more frequent, or it could be something as silly as transforming Link into an Octorok. There are 64 rings in total, each with very unique effects, and there are rings out there that make Link ridiculously powerful. But using rings can also get pretty tedious. You have to find the ring, get it appraised by this guy in town, who will then add it to your ring list. Then you have to go into the ring list and put the ring you want into the ring box. Then you go into the menu and then equip the ring from there. Yeah, you're going to be doing a lot of menuing in this game, but
And this is why I think remakes actually make things much better in quality of life stuff. Even bad remakes at least usually have better quality of life.
I'll give this a pass because of the Game Boy Color. There are rings exclusive to each game, and some can only be attained by linking the 2 games. So even with Oracle of Seasons completed, you can come back to your save file whenever you've collected a password from Oracle of Ages to get a corresponding prize in Oracle of Seasons which will then give you another secret you can take back to Ages for a reward in that game as well. You guys following this? With that in mind, I have my extremely complicated password here and a burning desire to close this chapter of my childhood by finishing the game I never got to buy. Let's get into The Legend of Zelda: Oracle of Ages. Also, if you're enjoying this, let me know in the comments. So if you decided to play Oracle of Ages first, the cutscenes in this game will be...
Yeah, write in the comments on my end, on his end as well if you want. Which of three do you prefer? Din, Nairo, or Farore? I'm definitely more of a Farore fan. I mean, I love green.
Slightly different, hinting at Twin Rova cooking up the grander scheme in the background. Having completed seasons, I'll link my game using the password, and it took me 10 minutes to figure out that this should have been a club and not a spade. So now that I have a linked game, we're going to experience Link's journey in Labrina as part of a continued story, with Twin Rova already revealing themselves and going forward with their plot. And with the sacrifice of Onyx, they've lit the flame of destruction. There are 2 more flames to light before they resurrect the evil king. We then cut to Link, who's been teleported to the realm of Labrina by the Triforce. It's here that we meet Impa again. Can you believe she doesn't recognize Link? What's going on here? She tells Link she's in search of a singer named Nehru and needs someone marked by the Triforce to help her get past this ominous barrier. So Link clears the way and the pair can hear a woman singing in the distance. It's Nehru.
Maybe you really just travel between 2 different worlds, and that's why Impa doesn't recognize you. It's like the same Link, but different worlds, like the Dark World and everything. It's not the first time you have more than one world in a Zelda game.
Surrounded by animals like a Disney princess, and for some reason only this bear decides to move out of the way for you, nobody else. We get this nice shot of a singing Nehru before Link and Impa introduce themselves. Nehru is accompanied by her childhood friend Ralph, and the two agree to join Link and Impa to head back to Hyrule for their safety. So it looks like mission accomplished? Impa? No, it can't be. You wouldn't betray us.
Yeah, boy.
Well, we learn that Impa is possessed by an evil sorceress named Varen.
Smash.
Which explains the short-term memory loss earlier. Varen reveals herself and intends to capture Nehru, the Oracle of Ages, but unlike Onyx, who just grabbed Din, Varen fully possesses Nehru's body and uses her powers of time to jump back into the distant past to start a new age of darkness. This affects Labrina in the present, causing people to cease to exist, turn to stone, and turn into old men. I'm still trying to figure out what happened to this guy. So a new journey begins for Link, with Impa once again sitting this one out. But she once again tells Link to meet up with the Maku tree in the main hub known as Lina City. How did the Maku tree get here? I guess we'll see. So Link heads to Lina City to meet with the Maku tree, and we discover that it's a female tree in this game instead. She tells Link that he must stop Varen from having her way with the timeline, but before she can offer more advice, she's affected by Varen's meddling in the past, completely disappearing from existence. It's clear that our hero needs a link to the past.
That guy got it.
Conveniently on the next screen, there's a warp portal left behind by Varen, allowing Link and Ralph to travel back 500 years to when Lina City was just Lina Village, ruled by Queen Ambi. And this queen is intent on building a giant tower originally meant to keep an eye out for her lost lover. It's not long before we discover Varen has influenced her to become a tyrant, forcing the queen's people to work on the tower non-stop, with the villagers now calling it the Black Tower. Link tracks down the Maku tree, a sapling in this time, and saves her from being jumped by Varen's minions. And with the
I honestly prefer Oracle of Seasons. It's just, you gather those seasons after one after the other and stuff. It's much more interesting, and I just like the map and everything more for some reason. But I mean, both games are great, and honestly probably the best Game Boy Zeldas, including like everything up to GBA. Yeah, I do like them more than Minish Cap, definitely, and more than Link's Awakening.
the tree saved, she agrees to repay Link when she grows up, and also insists that she'll be his bride. Wonder how that would work. So we go back to the present. The Maku tree does fulfill her end of the bargain and tells Link he must track down the 8 essences of time to gain the power to defeat Varen and save Nehru. So now the game opens up for Link to do the same thing again 8 times with 8 new dungeons to explore. Oracle of Ages was developed as the more puzzle-oriented game of the two, requiring Link to go back and forth between the past and the present to progress. After clearing the first dungeon, Link will obtain Nehru's Harp of Ages, which allows him to play songs that will open portals to the past and vice versa in specific areas of the map. It won't always be obvious as to when Link should time travel, especially if you're looking to gain access to certain rewards like the Pieces of Heart. This puzzle-based aspect leads to interesting situations, like the time Link washes up on Crescent Island while he's in the past.
are really cute little dinosaurs in their sprite form. Not so much in their artwork.
This reptilian race called Tokay will rob Link blind, requiring him to find a way around the island to get back all of his gear from the various Tokay scattered around. And replaying this part reminded me of the Eventide Island challenge in Breath of the Wild, where Link has absolutely no items to work with and just has to...
That island was fun.
...go into straight survival mode. There's a seed called Scent Seeds he'll need to use to trade for the rest of his items, but it comes from a tree that doesn't exist in the past. So Link will have to find a sapling to plant in the past and then jump to the present to collect seeds to bring back to the past to get the rest of his gear. And there's also puzzles reflected in both dungeons and the bosses that await you in there. This is just my opinion here, but the dungeons in this game are a vast improvement over the ones in Seasons. But that doesn't mean that this game doesn't have its stinkers. Two dungeons that stand out here to describe this contrast is Dungeon 6, Mermaid's Cave, and Dungeon 7, Jabu Jabu's Belly. Mermaid's Cave is practically two dungeons in one, a cave hidden behind a waterfall in the past. Link will have to brave this dungeon both in the past and the present to be fully able to clear it, requiring you to completely exit the dungeon, play the Harp of Ages to go forward in time, and then enter the dungeon once again. So in the present version of this dungeon, there's an item called Mermaid Suit, which allows Link to dive underwater and swim, which he'll need to take back to the past in order to defeat the boss at the end of the dungeon. Shitty swimming mechanics aside, this dungeon was one of the highlights of the game for me and cleverly incorporates this game's time mechanic. That next dungeon though. What if we took these shitty swimming mechanics and built a whole level based around that? That is Jabu Jabu's Belly, which I dub as the 2D version of the dreaded water temple from Ocarina of Time. Remember Lord Jabu?
Why is the water stuff always the worst? So weird.
Jabu Jabu from that game and all the fun you had exploring inside of him with Princess Ruto? Don't take that out of context. This dungeon is not like that. The whole dungeon is based around having to alter water levels on 3 different floors, having the player perform multiple passes through many of these rooms because you'll either need the room submerged in water to clear large gaps, or you need it devoid of water entirely to gain access to a switch or item. Not to mention to swim, you need to tap the directional pad in the direction you want to go multiple times. And I'm sure it controls this way so that you can use the A and B buttons to use items underwater, but seeing as I've been swimming faster by mashing A this whole time with the flippers, it's very easy to forget how this new suit controls. Rinse and repeat this water draining process multiple times and maybe you'll make it out alive, but this one was definitely a slog. Most of the bosses on the other hand are a breeze, each having some kind of gimmick you'll have to figure out to best them. Like this annoying spinning reject from the Thwomp family known as the Head Thwomp. You'll have to throw bombs into its open head top thing, timing your throw just right to land on the red face for it to take damage. Or what about Smog, a giant fart demon that splits itself into tiny clouds that you'll have to combine before you can damage him. These are all brand new bosses unique to Oracle of Ages, which makes it pretty clear that the team started development with an original Zelda title in mind, while Oracle of Seasons has a lot of leftovers from its original concept as a Legend of Zelda remake. With this in mind, I've noticed that Oracle of Ages has a tad more polish, and the overall plot is a bit more fleshed out. Not to mention the dungeons feel better designed. Which brings me back to our story of how this Lost Trilogy panned out. With the mystical Seat of Power revealed to the world in 1999 and this Triforce series being established, Flagship wanted to be able to link these 3 titles together and allow them to be picked up and played in any order. With such an ambitious project, the team had over 10 scenario writers working on 3 unique stories intending to be released 6 weeks apart from each other. So the next in line was Mystical Seed of Wisdom. This was the one that must have become Oracle of Ages, with the puzzles planned to be based around colors? Wait, that doesn't sound right. That's not what we got here. The box in the color scheme is blue, and in Zelda that means wisdom.
You need to say clearly what happened.
So Seed of Courage was going to have the theme of time, where you would need to utilize morning, noon, evening, and night in order to solve various riddles in the game. Okay, so that's not exactly what Oracle of Ages became, but this is very close to the mark. So that means our lost game out of the bunch is this title known as Mystical Seed of Wisdom. Kinda.
And what happened?
So here's what happened. With Seed of Power mostly developed, Flagship continued developing the other games, with Nehru being featured in Seed of Wisdom, and Furore slated to play a major role in Seed of Courage. So it's true that the Mystical Seed of Wisdom game would have had color-based puzzle mechanics, and according to IGN at that time, there would have been various events, areas, and tools built around certain colors, which sounds pretty fitting for the, Game Boy Color. There's further proof for this in
That's one thing Nintendo always does. They love to play around with the new stuff that console can do. And Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
And 3 different concept sketches for Nehru, with her holding a paintbrush and a palette. Flagship was even looking to connect the trilogy of games through some cell phone adapter technology that would have allowed players to perform a data transfer. This idea would eventually change into the password system we see in the final product used to link the 2 games. And as the project went on, 3 games proved to be too much for the Game Boy Color to handle, and the team struggled to get the password system working across all 3 titles. So Flagship had to drastically scale things back.
Yeah, the problem is, if you have 2 games, you link them. Okay, one does one thing in the other. But suddenly with 3, you have like this one and this one are already connected, so what happens in this one? But you also have, if these 2 are connected, what happens in this one then? And if these 2 are connected, what happens in this one then? And if none is connected, it's like exponentially bigger, which even today is, of course, not impossible, but a lot of stuff to think about.
This resulted in one of the games being scrapped, which I'll say was Mystical Seed of Wisdom, since we lost the color-based system from that title. And based on the themes of being able to change the time of day in Mystical Seed of Courage, it looks like that was the game that became Oracle of Ages. But now that I think about it, if you look at the past setting in Oracle of Ages, there's a slight filter that makes it look like it's later in the day. So my speculation is, instead of adding in several different hours of the day, they used the existing filters depicting evening to become Labrina in the past. As for Nehru, she got to stick around instead of Furore, and they ended up giving her the title Oracle of Ages. I'm sorry, Furore. Maybe someday they'll remake this trilogy for a modern console and you'll get your own game this time, fingers crossed. They already did it for Link's Awakening. As for Flagship, this wouldn't be their last run-in with the Zelda franchise, with them following up Oracle of Seasons and Ages with the Minish Cap for Nintendo's next handheld, the Game Boy Advance. And don't worry, we'll get to that game someday. So we return to Labrina, and before we get to this exciting conclusion of the tale, I have to talk about some of the cool things that carried over from my Oracle of Seasons playthrough. The world map this time is completely unique from Oracle of Seasons, with different NPCs and aesthetics depending on the time period Link is in. Many different races and characters from Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask make an appearance in these games, like the Gorons and Zoras, inhabiting mountain and underwater environments respectively. If you ended up playing Ages first, Subrosians don't make an appearance during your playthrough, but in a Linked game, it looks like they decided to vacation in Labrina. They're also returning characters like Maple, who serves the same purpose this time around. And wherever in his growth spurt Butts here left off, carries on into the Linked game as well. Not to mention Link's deeds in Holodrum are referenced throughout. I have to give these titles props for making these worlds truly feel connected, especially once you get into a Linked game. By taking this secret from this old lady, bringing it to another NPC in my Oracle of Seasons file, completing this minigame, and taking the secret at the end of the quest back into my Oracle of Ages file, I finally got my hands on the Master Sword after 22 years. This has been one hell of a journey for me, you guys don't understand. Anyway, back to our story. So, Link is going around collecting essences of time from the dungeons, and at one point is told by Impa that Zelda has arrived in Labrina, but was whisked away by Varin and Onyx's minion, Vyre. Vyre took her to some place in the Black Tower, so Link goes after her, and the biggest surprise for me in this game so far is that I got to play Donkey Kong in a Zelda game. Link saves Zelda, which leads to her and Impa deciding to lay low at Nehru's house. Please, I already have another damsel in stress to worry about. So once Link completes Dungeon 6, he and Ralph decide to go on a full-on assault of Queen Ambi's castle to corner Varin and save Nehru. Surprisingly, Link does end up fighting the possessed Nehru, and by knocking her out with mystery seeds, Varin is vulnerable. After a few hits, she's fully exorcised from Nehru's body, but she decides Queen Ambi would serve as a perfect backup host. Cornered by the Queen's guards, Link, Ralph, and Nehru retreat back to the present, and while Nehru is saved, everyone decides it's not the best idea to leave an evil sorceress to do as she pleases in the past. So with that in mind, Link must continue on to get 2 more essences. And if you feel like there's more plot this time around, it's because there is. It's almost night and day between this and Season. The Nehru kidnapping plot on top of Queen Ambi and the Black Tower, while Twin Rova keeps bragging about how Ganon is coming back, Zelda showing up, all while Link has to keep pushing through these dungeons to get the...
I honestly love the essences. They are such a neat idea and cool design. That's great. And really, we do need this 3rd game. Just give it to us sometime, please.
Essences of time. This plot had me extremely invested by the time I got to this part. So Link obtains the 7th essence from Jabu Jabu's belly, and once again, fuck this dungeon. The Zora seem to agree with me because they're so impressed by this feat. They reward Link with a Zora scale, making him an honorary Zora. This eventually leads to a run-in with this undead pirate crew we met in Holodrum after their ship got stuck in the desert. We find out they're originally...
Quick theory. Is this the pirate crew from Majora's Mask? The Gerudo pirates just dead?
from Labrina, but they're stuck again, this time in a stormy section of the seas known as the Sea of Storms. But with the help of the Zora scale we just got, the captain is able to calm the seas and escape. As a reward, he gives Link the Toke Eyeball, the item Link needs to access the final dungeon, the Ancient Tomb. Finally, after exploring this dungeon and defeating
this boss was cool,
the most nuanced boss in the game, I found this one kind of fun, Link retrieves the final essence of time. It's time to use them to end Varin once and for all. So Link heads back to the Maku tree, who just like an Oracle of Seasons uses the essences of time to create her version of the huge Maku seed, a seed that gives Link the power to see the ultimate truth. Twin Rova stops by one more time to troll Link and tell him it's too late, they will soon light the flame of sorrow. But this doesn't deter Link from his mission. He heads to the Black Tower in the past to confront the possessed Queen Ambi. But before entering, we find out that Ralph is committed to make the hard choice to kill Queen Ambi to stop Varin in the process. So Link, why are you not telling him you found a way to exorcise her like you did with Nehru? To make this worse, Zelda tells Link that Ambi is Ralph's ancestor, and by killing her, Ralph would be erasing himself from existence. A sacrifice he's willing to make, but totally wouldn't need to if Link just spoke up. So Link enters the tower and uses the huge Maku seed, but we find out Twin Rova's threats were true. It's too late. Varin has spread enough sorrow to light the flame of sorrow, but Link must press on. And
there's even a third pot that's like for the third game technically, right?
We'll say while it's still pretty short, the tower is much more fleshed out than Onyx's castle and serves as somewhat of a mini dungeon before we finally take on Varin. Once at the top, we see Ralph trying to kill Ambi while Link just stands there to watch this play out. I'm not kidding. Does Link low-key want Ralph erased from the timeline? Luckily, he gets instantly folded and lives to see another day, so now it's up to Link. And he fights the possessed Ambi, which requires you to do the same exact thing you did when you fought Nehru, and I find it odd that Varin would think that this would work. But like any final boss, she has multiple phases when she finally leaves Ambi's body and takes Link on one-on-one, or one-on-one with Shadow Link she summons. But finally, Varin is vanquished, and Link, Ralph, and Nehru decide to head back to the newly saved village. Varin isn't dead!
Oh shit!
And ambushes the team, revealing to Link her final form, this turtle.
What?
Or rather, she can shapeshift into several forms. But from a visual...
It's basically like that final boss in Link's Awakening, right? That also had different forms.
perspective, this doesn't feel as grandiose as Onyx's final dragon form, but I think out of the two, it's a much better fight, leaning slightly into that puzzle-based theme Oracle of Ages has going for it, where you have to figure out each form's weakness. But after a long and hard battle, Link finally defeats Varin, who tells Link her purpose has already been served. Sorrow was spread throughout Labrina, and the flame of sorrow has been lit. Ganon, the Dark King, will soon return. Despite this, Queen Ambi is finally able to go back to being a benevolent ruler, extending her thanks to Link, and with that, the timeline has been saved.
Wrong.
Impa, as usual, arrives with bad news. Twin Rova scooped up Zelda while she was helping out the people of Labrina, and in such a cop-out way, this one action causes the last flame, the Flame of Despair, to be lit. You can tell the Flame of Despair would have been the focus for the final game, but I suppose it had to get lit somehow.
Also, it should be green.
With Zelda in their possession, these old ladies plan to use her as a sacrifice to revive Ganon. But in an Avengers-style crossover, Din somehow appears in the past to come to Link's aid, and alongside Nehru, they use their Oracle powers to send Link directly to Twin Rova's lair. It's time for the final battle. After all the shit talk between the two games, Link finally takes on these witches, having to bounce their incoming spells to the opposite twin to properly damage them. This was pretty annoying, but once you do enough damage, they combine together just like in Ocarina of Time. And this battle can be quite the gauntlet, so hopefully you gathered a ton of heart containers during your adventure. Also, I will not fall like Varin and Nox? Who's Nox? It seems like the twins were on a nickname basis with Onyx because they just call him this twice in the epilogue. Anyway, in their fused form, they'll switch between fire and ice forms, and not only will Link have to strike them while dodging their attacks with fire or ice plastered all over the terrain, you'll also have to shoot them with a mystery seed once they're vulnerable. A step that I'm not sure how you're expected to know. I'm sure there's probably a clue somewhere, but I ended up using a guide by this point. And finally, these hags are defeated, and with their final breath, they choose to become the sacrifice for Ganon. There's no stopping it now. The Dark King has returned, more bloodthirsty and angry than ever. Personally, I found this fight to be easier than Twin Rova, because you'll just be striking Ganon with your sword until he goes down, but he hits like a fucking truck, so plan accordingly. There's even this phase where he teleports you to some mirror dimension and all your movement controls are reversed, so good luck dodging here. I will admit, for the sake of time, I was using
Well, traveling back in time in Oracle of Ages is, according to the game,
the rewind function on the Switch to avoid having to start this battle again and again.
You were just making it look like you were playing. You're a phony!
But after enough hits, it's finally over. Ganon has been defeated once again. We go to retrieve Princess Zelda. She reveals since the ritual wasn't fully completed and Twin Rova made the sacrifice instead, Ganon was incomplete and revived as a mindless, angry version of himself instead. The altar begins to crumble, but with the help of our Oracle friends Din and Nehru, they get Link and Zelda to safety. Finally, the world is
that's a lot of work to have Ganon return, when usually he just returns when he wants to.
at peace, and this crazy adventure is complete. We get the end credits showing Labrina and Holodrum at peace, while Link takes some time to hang out one last time with Ricky, Moosh, and Dimitri. Princess Zelda returns to Hyrule, and in this last shot, we see Link boarding a ship and waving goodbye to all of his new friends. And now that I look back on this, between the two games, this can be
And this ship might be the ship from Link's Awakening, right? What if he just stranded there?
between a 30 to 40 hour experience, and seeing this end screen was so cathartic for me. It's like I put this game down for 20 plus years and finally closed out this chapter of my life. Good thing it's over? Hero secret and a password? Yeah, I'm not doing that. To truly 100% complete this game, you'd use this hero secret to start a brand new playthrough in Oracle of Ages, which begins a Heroes game. And this allows you to see all the events you would have missed due to it being a linked game. So essentially it's New Game Plus, because you can start with more hearts and you can transfer your rings over from your previous playthroughs. Beat Oracle of Ages and you'll get another password called the Holodrum Secret, which would allow you to experience Oracle of Seasons as a link game, this time to see how the climax to the story would have played out in Holodrum instead. We're not doing all of that for this video, but after doing some research, there are a couple of plot points that are closed out in an Oracle of Seasons link game that are worth mentioning. For example, that undead pirate crew we encountered in both games. We know they've been either stuck in the desert or in the sea.
Yeah, I honestly never did that as well. I played through Seasons, then played through Ages with it linked, and then I was done with the games.
Of storms for some time. Link your game to Oracle of Seasons and you'll discover that the captain of this crew is actually Queen Ambi's long-lost lover. You'll find Ambi in the desert in present day.
Guess my theory was pretty wrong then.
Sent there by Nehru at her request, and she encounters the captain, who tells her the seas still call him. And despite time traveling and braving this desert, Ambi says she understands and promises that she'll await his return. Did Nehru not just fuck up the timeline by doing this? Assuming these two never met ever again, you would assume Ambi found love elsewhere because of Ralph's whole existence. So with Nehru doing this, Ambi says she'll wait for this undead guy in the present, and chances are they can't have kids with him like this. And even if they did, they would be born in the present. So Nehru just wrote Ralph's existence out of this timeline. And I know I also made jokes about Impa being useless, disguising herself as a cook in Din's troop here, but if you play Oracle of Seasons as a link game, we discover that the entire troop are undercover Hyrulean knights, presumably all in disguise to escort Din to Hyrule. This doesn't matter as much since they failed anyway, but it's good to get closure on that plot point as well. As for Link, let's talk about Link. The game ends with him hopping aboard a ship to head back to Hyrule, and there are two theories about this Link in particular. The first is that this is the same Link from A Link to the Past, who already defeated Ganon, which leads to the events of the Oracle games with Twin Rova trying to revive him. The Hyrule Historia Collector's book published back in 2011 agrees with this theory, placing Oracle of Ages and Seasons directly after A Link to the Past on the timeline. So why is this ending important then? Because you could directly correlate Link leaving on a ship, leading directly into the intro to Link's Awakening, where he wrecks in a storm and ends up on Koholint Island, which puts Link's Awakening after the events of this game. Spoilers for Link's Awakening, but we find out the entire setting for this game takes place within the dreams and nightmares of a being called the Windfish, which seems to draw heavily from Link's memories as well. So many fans believe there's a plot reason for some of these reused enemies and assets from Link's Awakening in the Oracle games. Like Facade in particular. What if plot-wise, Link's memories of facing Facade in the Oracle games is what influenced the boss Facade Link faces in Link's Awakening? We see the nightmares on Koholint shapeshift into Aghanim and Ganon to fight off Link, so the same could go for Facade here. There's also the NPCs Malon and Talon in Oracle of Seasons, characters from Ocarina of Time that were inspired by Link's Awakening's Mardian and Tardian. But plot-wise, what if Mardian and Tardian are dream versions based on Malon and Talon based on his memories of them from the Oracle games? The one reason I could find that debunks the idea that Oracle comes before Link's Awakening is that Zelda seems to not know who Link is when they run into each other in the game. We know they met in A Link to the Past, so what gives here? Which brings me to the other theory, and as of right now, the confirmed timeline. This game takes place after A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening. The revised timeline in the more recent Zelda Encyclopedia acknowledges this, with this Link still being the same Link from A Link to the Past, and the Ganon we see Twin Rova attempting to revive is the one who was defeated in A Link to the Past. I'm not a fan of this version of events as much because these games seem to fit right in between A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening.
Yeah.
And if this encyclopedia acknowledges this is the same,
Especially with the ship, like, that ship gets wrecked and then Koholint, right? It just makes complete sense. Unlike the timeline split. I don't like the splitting timeline. That doesn't make sense to me.
same Link from A Link to the Past, then the whole reason the first theory was changed or debunked is a moot point because Zelda still speaks as if she's never met Link before. Therefore, there's no reason these games can't occur between Link's Awakening and A Link to the Past. But it also says here that his fate is that he sets sail for training. The Japanese version of this encyclopedia doesn't bother to even acknowledge which Link this is, which led many to believe that this is a different Link in Zelda altogether, which
I mean, there's also the fact that the Zelda in Zelda 2 is not the one from Zelda 1, but the Link is the same. And the Zelda in Zelda 2 is like 500 or 1,000 years asleep, and it's messed up. Very, very messed up.
furthers my point that Nintendo does not care about this timeline. Discuss in the comments.
No, we're not gonna watch this. Yeah, this was a great video, very informative, and I wish it would have gone a bit more into why the third game never happened, but I think that was all the info available, and it was very enjoyable, and I really liked those games. So, I guess this is until next time. Bye-bye.